Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here. It's really an honor to be presenting in front of you all, and thank you for the introduction. It's been a long time since Lorna asked me to present here, and I think since then I became a professor in 3 universities, so no longer associate professor. So you can tell that COVID has affected us all, unfortunately, with the time, and I hope that the future will be brighter for all of us, because it's been tough 2 years for us. So I do apologize. I'm going to talk about myself, and I don't mean to offend anybody because I'm very politically incorrect. So don't take notice of what I say, please. My name is Munjed. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I practice in Sydney. It's a very busy city. My day-to-day work is hip and knee replacements, and it's boring like bad shit. So, but I do a lot of them. So if you have any sore knees, please come and see me. But I have special interest in this cutting-edge technology called osseointegration, which is kind of a technology that's fascinating. Well, I had the idea of making half human, half machine when I watched The Terminator at the age of 12 in Baghdad, and I thought that I'll pursue my dream and make half human, half machines. And thanks for being in Australia, I managed to do that, and we became the world leaders in this field. And now my center, which is the Limb Reconstruction Center in Macquarie University in Sydney, basically teach the whole world about this technology. And this technology is basically people who lose limbs. We replace their limb with a robot, and I hook up their nerves and rejig their muscles in order to operate a robotic arm or robotic leg, which is kind of cool. And it did even attract young and more senior people, including Prince Harry and Her Majesty the Queen. And I had the pleasure of visiting her there because I started treating British soldiers who lost their limbs in Afghanistan and Iraq, the same as American soldiers and other soldiers from the coalition. And part of the work that I do is training surgeons in these countries. At the same time, I do the charity work in developing countries where basically this technology is not available. So I go and do volunteer work in Southeast Asia, Iraq, and the rest of the Middle East to devote some time to people that need this. And basically, one of my dreams, and the first dream in my life, is that the day come before I die, that this technology become available to people who need it most, people who cannot afford it, because the technology is very expensive. And I think this will be happening, and that because the majority of people who lose limbs, they become dependent on the society, and they lose their jobs. So by providing them with the ability to mobilize and the ability to function, it will restore their life and psychologically improve their quality of life, and they become more functional, and they return. Majority of them return back to the society in a functioning capacity. So I hope the day will come that this technology will become available to everybody around the world. The second dream is a different story. It's having a fast train going from Melbourne to Brisbane. And Clive Palmer actually watched me talking about this, and now he took it and he put it in banners. But that was my idea, not his. And the third dream, which is very, very difficult, is that the day will come that we would treat each other the way we want to be treated, and treat each other as human beings. So on that note, I was born in Baghdad. Baghdad was a city that is similar to any major city, like Sydney basically, and we didn't even have fireworks, and the fireworks were slightly different to Sydney fireworks. They were real planes being shot by real missiles, but they still were a lot of light and colors, and you're pretty much safe unless it falls on you. But we lived our life, and we lived under the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein, and a lot of people asked the question, would it be better to stay back then in the days? And in one way, at least he was a secular dictator, and if you follow the line and you mind your own business, you can live your life safely. So I did, and I managed to go to school, and I managed to graduate and become a doctor. And to be honest, I didn't think about leaving the country at all, and I was very comfortable in Iraq, and especially that living among people that you know. And a lot of people ask the question about why refugees travel and why people come to this country and why they want to take our, basically, live on our social security or take our jobs. Believe me, the refugees that I've met and the refugees that I've seen, none of them would leave their country if they had a choice, because even if the life situation is miserable where you're born, it's the place of your birth, and it's where you're comfortable, and if you know people around you, you are kind of living in an environment that provide you security and familiarity, and it's very difficult to detach yourself, especially if you have no roots, and try to start life in a different place. So for that reason, I never wanted to leave. But one day, everything changed in my life, where I was a junior medical practitioner in Baghdad, and at the university hospital, where we were confronted with 3 busloads of army deserters escorted by Republican guards and Ba'ath Party members. And they ordered us to abandon the elective list and start mutilating these army deserters by chopping their ears off. So that was the moment that changed everything. The head of the department refused and said, this is barbaric, it's against the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So they dragged him outside to the car park and they put a bullet in his head, as simple as that. And then they turned to the rest of us and said, okay, well, anyone share this man's view, come forward, otherwise proceed with our orders. So I had to face a decision. Do I obey the command and live with guilt for the rest of my life? Do I refuse and end up with a bullet in my head, or do I escape? And all of a sudden, I decided to run away. I had to hide in the female toilet, which took 5 hours, and it felt like 5 years. And from there onward, I couldn't return to even the car park to get my car. I couldn't go to my house, so I took a taxi out to the outskirts of Baghdad, and then from there to a farm in western Iraq, and I had to stay in hiding until my family and friends provided me with a large sum of money and forged a passport for me, which until now I don't know whether it's legal or not. And they managed to smuggle me outside the country through the borders with Jordan. And everything shut down in front of me. All my life changed, from a spoiled brat comfortably living in Iraq to someone who's running for his life. The only country on earth that would provide an Iraqi national with a visa was Malaysia, and I thought I would go there. And then I took the trip, took that plane, and then sequence of events led me to be here in front of you. In Abu Dhabi airport, I met 2 young men who looked very rough, and they couldn't speak a word of English, and they were very nervous. And I started chatting to them. They turned out to be 2 Iraqi young men who are running away for one reason or another. And I asked them, where are you guys going? And they said, we are tourists. We're going for a holiday. And I said, yeah, right, you look very touristy to me. and then they realized that I could speak a little bit of English, and they said, okay, well, if you come with us, interpret for us, we will take you. And we didn't know where we were going, to be honest. They had a small piece of paper with a number written on it, and as we landed in Kuala Lumpur airport, we dialed the number, and there was our first introduction to a people smuggler, and his name was Mahdi. And on the phone he said, come and meet me in Chowket in the city, and I will be wearing a brown hat, brown short and shirt, and I'll be standing in front of McDonald's. We got out of the taxi, and this guy looked blonde, blue eyes. He looked like Steve Irwin, basically. And I started talking to him in English, and he thought that I'm an idiot because he turned up to be an Iraqi Kurd. And within 5 minutes, he took us aside and he said, well, where do you come from? And we said, we came from Iraq. And he said, okay, right, where you want to go? And I said, we don't know, anywhere safe. And he said, okay, give me your passports, give me this amount of money, which was significant, and I'll come back to you tomorrow with your next destination. And I put my hand up and I said, well, hang on, I met you 5 minutes ago. How do you expect me to trust you with my money and passport? And he said, how dare you question my credibility? I'm a respectable smuggler. And he turned up to be a respectable smuggler. The next day, he came back with first-class tickets, Garuda Airlines, to Indonesia. And he was not just respectable, but he was very precise. He said, when you get through Jakarta airport, don't go to the covered woman, don't go to the guy with too many stars, don't go to the guy with the beard, go to the guy with 1 star on his shoulder, give him your passport, and make sure that you put $100 inside the passport. And I said, well, can I ask a question? He said, yes. And I said, well, are you expecting me to bribe a custom officer in a major international airport? He said, yes. Do you have a problem with that? So anyway, everything went very smooth, exactly as he described, and he gave a small number as well on a piece of paper, and he said, dial this number when you get there, and they will tell you where to go. So we dialed the number as we got to Jakarta, and it was a journey around an hour, 15 minutes in the taxi to the outskirts of Jakarta, and we got there. It was a very rundown hotel, like 6-story building, and we got to the foyer, and there were like tens and tens of Middle Eastern looking people, and the situation was completely desperate. A lot of people, we started talking to people, a lot of people have been there for months and months, lost all their money, and they were very desperate. And I thought, this is it, I'm stuck here. And but was the first time that I realized that doctors are important. In the foyer, these 2 men that I was accompanying basically started telling people that this guy is a doctor. So I got to my room, and there was this knock on my door, and I opened the door, and there was another gentleman who turned up to be a people smuggler. He was bearded and black shirt, black trousers, and he was praying a lot, and he said, are you the doctor? And I said, yes, I am. How can I help you? And he said, I prayed to God that God will provide me with an imam, a religious figure. I said, okay. And he said, and I prayed to God that God will provide me with a doctor, and you're the doctor. And I said, okay, it doesn't make sense. What can I do for you? And he said, well, I'm Omid the smuggler. And I said, nice to meet you, Mr. Smuggler. And what can I do for you? And he said, I have a brand new boat going to Australia in 2 days, and I need an imam and a doctor. And that was the first time ever to hear about going to Australia. So we were like sheep being herded by these people smugglers. And I said, well, what do you need? And he said, well, the imam is coming from Iran, and he has this piece of clay that is mixed with the Prophet Muhammad's grandson's blood. The reason for him to be there is to sprinkle some dust from this clay on the sea, so that will calm the waters. I said, wow, that's a great technology. And he said, well, I have a problem. He has a heavily pregnant daughter, so I need a doctor to look after the daughter so the imam cannot be distracted. And I said, I'm your doctor. So basically, and he said, what do you need? And I said, well, how many people will be on the boat? He said, oh, it's brand new. I said, that's beside the point. Answer the question, how many people? And he said, oh, around 50. I said, okay, well, I need 100 drips, 100 giving sets, a lot of nausea and vomiting tablets and injections. And he said, okay, I'll get you all of that. I said, how can you get me all of that? They are all medical supplies. You can't just go and buy them. He said, don't you worry, I have connections. Have you seen the cars outside the hotel? And they were like 10 or so police cars. And I said, yeah, I noticed that there are a lot of police cars outside. He said, yeah, they are all for my protection. So he came back the next day with exactly what I requested. And the journey started. We were 50 or so on the bus. Early hours of the morning, we left Jakarta, heading south to the southern shore of Java. We got there around 24 hours later, like the early hours of the next morning, to an abandoned village. Unfortunately, this smuggler didn't turn up to be as respectable as the one before him. When we got there, we discovered that there were 3 busloads of us, and the boat that was supposed to be brand new turned out to be a leaky boat that is not even seaworthy. And they crammed us on this boat like sardines, and then they started stripping people of all their belonging and put them on the boat. And basically there was no space to sit down. And I'm sure through the news you've seen a lot of these images of boat people trying to cross the high seas. The journey started toward Australia, and as we left, the sun was rising, and I could see that there was a big ship, grey colour with white numbers written on it, and was tailing us. And as we got to international waters, our boat stopped, and that ship came very close, and a black dinghy came from that ship and joined us. And we had our Indonesian skipper. With a broken English, he said, straight, Christmas Island, 36 hours. Miss, mainland in 2 weeks, I go home, goodbye. So he jumped on that dinghy and left us to face the element on our own, basically. So we were left on a leaky boat, and people were shoveling, like, bucketing waters out of the hole, and it was miserable. We were lucky, though, that there was an Iraqi sailor running away from the Iraqi naval force, was there on the boat with us, and he could read maritime charts. So he managed to steer the boat toward Christmas Island. The boat journey was very rough. That piece of clay turned out to be made in China, didn't do anything. And it was like, by the end of it, everybody was on top of each other. Half of people were comatose, and I was a hopeless doctor. So anyway, but the sailor was very smart. He managed to get us to safety. So we got to Christmas Island. And in Christmas Island, actually, we were received by the Australian Federal Police. They were very kind people, and they received us with respect and warm hospitality. They gave us a warm shower and a Salvation Army change of clothes, which was the best thing ever happened to me. I still remember that shower to this day. And they put us in a basketball stadium because back then in 1999, the Australian government was not prepared for the flux of boat people at that time. So we were all lying on mattresses in the basketball stadium, and Christmas Island was not a detention center back then. It was like a phosphate mine island, and it was the red crab season. the island was covered with red crab. There were 100 million of them. Unfortunately now, half of these red crabs are dying because not because of refugees, but because of yellow ants that are brought by merchant ships. And these yellow ants basically spit acid in the red crab eye and kill it and feed on it. So there are 50 million red crabs now, so we need to do something about that. But in Christmas Island, I learned very important lessons in my life. The most important lesson in my life, who made me who I am now, basically. And on the third day, I was, just before the lesson, I heard the first Australian joke, actually, in Christmas Island. The captain on the island introduced me to his deputy, and he said, he was a very tall guy, thin, Dutch background, looking like from the Lord of the Rings kind of people, and he said, "Show him your shoulder," and he showed me his shoulder, and he had a scar on his clavicle, and I said, "Okay," and he said, "When you go to the mainland after you get released from the detention center, I want you to visit this place called Tasmania." We had to chop off one of his heads and a few of his fingers to look like this. I didn't understand the joke back then. Just before COVID, I was giving a talk in Launceston, and I started on the wrong foot. Everybody had one head, so I thought, "Oh, you all had surgery." So, anyway, didn't go well. That's why Launceston is voting Liberal now, or actually One Nation, or Pauline Hanson, whoever. Yeah. Anyway, so they were all greenies to start with. So the lesson that I learned in Christmas Island, which made me who I am, basically, on the third day I was asked by the federal police to join them to intercept another boat that was arriving, and as an interpreter. So we left on two barges. One barge was the captain and his deputy, and on another barge was another officer who I've never met before. And this guy, and he was with me, and this guy, as we went into sea, he looked at me and he said, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "When was the last time you spoke to your family?" And I said, "Well, just before leaving Jakarta." So he said, "So your family don't know if you're alive or dead?" And I said, "No, they don't." And he said, "Well, sit on the ground. I'm about to break the law and put my job on the line. And no matter what you do, don't ever tell anyone." Mind you that I tell everybody now. And he pulled out a satellite phone from his pocket and handed it over to me, and he said, "Call your family and tell them that you're safe." And this guy didn't have to do what he did, but he saw another person in need of help, and he helped him. And from this point onward, I decided that I would do the same, basically. And I'm forever grateful to this guy for what he did to me. And honestly, because of him, I managed to speak to my mum, and I wonder if she would last any more days without knowing about my destination. So I'm forever grateful to this guy. Eventually, the boat turned up to be filled with Vietnamese, so I was a hopeless interpreter. And so we spent 5 days on Christmas Island. I was very upset that I was the last person to leave Christmas Island to go to the mainland. And the captain on the island said to me, "Don't get upset, because the situation in the mainland is completely different, and you will not like it." And I said, "Okay." And he was right. Once we got to the detention center, things changed completely. The nice treatment that we received by the federal police completely changed when we got handed over to the ACM, or the Australian Correctional Management. We were put in Curtin Detention Center. The first minute we entered, we were marked with permanent markers on our shoulder with numbers. I was given a new name called 982, and that became my name for almost a year inside the detention center. We were treated like animals, basically, in the detention center, and no matter what I do, and to tell you about the situation in the detention center, I can't give it its justice. But I can give you a small comparison. I was a pain in the ass for the government and the Department of Immigration, so I kept vocalizing about our rights and the way people deserve to be treated as human beings. So very quickly I was singled out as a troublemaker, and as a result of that, I spent a lot of time in prisons and police lockups, and the Derby lockup was every few weekends. I spent some weekends there, and I spent around 40 days or so out of the year inside maximum security prison in Karatha jail, as well as in Broome maximum security prison. And I'll tell you what, the prison system in Western Australia is absolutely superb. I recommend it to everybody. And comparatively, between the prison and the detention center, the prison was absolutely like heaven. I was treated like a human being. I was treated with respect by the prison officers. I was given clean change of clothes. I could eat good food, and I could read the newspaper. I could even watch TV, and I had access to a lethal weapon called a telephone, which I didn't have in the detention center. So I caused a lot of damage, actually, because I managed to make a lot of phone calls in the prison. And so when the Department of Immigration realized that I'm causing a lot of damage, because I started talking to United Nations and also because back then it was approaching Sydney Olympics, and there was a big hush-hush about the detainees situation, because it was exploding with numbers. So the Department of Immigration put me back in the detention center again. And this time they didn't put me with the common people, they put me inside a place called the Suicide Watch Box. And it was like a box, and you can search it, it's called 225, and it was like a 2.5 meter by 1.5 meter box that has a small hole in the door, 20-cent piece, and a mattress on the floor, no sheet, no pillow, so I don't suffocate or hang myself. And I spent most of the day there, around 22 hours there. Every time I ask the question, what am I doing here? They say, we're rehabilitating you because you were in prison. So eventually I was found that I was a legitimate refugee, so I was released. And to be honest, I caused a lot of embarrassment for the detention manager back then. His name was Craig Wallace. I would love to meet him one day. And he was one of the most potent and most passionate detention center managers for Philip Roddock back then. And this guy didn't like me, so the group that I was supposed to be released with were flown to Brisbane, but he said to me, you get out on the street. And that was in Curtin Detention Centre in northwest of Australia. And I said, okay, well, where do I go? And he said, well, go on the street, there is a Greyhound bus, you stop in the bus station, the Greyhound bus will pick you, you have some money, we'll change some money for you, and you're on your own. And I thought, well, this guy's trying to punish me, but what an opportunity. I will take the bus from Derby to Broome, to Perth, to Adelaide, to Melbourne, to Sydney. And I circumnavigated Australia around the bus. And it was a fantastic journey. I strongly recommend it to people if you want to do it. So anyway, after spending 1 year in detention center, I thought I wasted a lot of taxpayers' money, so I started working straight away. The first job in Australia I did was toilet cleaning, and it was a fine job, but then I realized that I've done medical degree, so I might as well try to work as a doctor. So I started knocking on hospital doors and trying to get a job. And went to Royal Perth Hospital and asked for the after-hours doctor, and turned up to be an Iraqi guy. And he came out and shook my hand, and he said, what can I do for you? I said, well, I'm a doctor, I would like to work, can you find me a job? Excuse me. And he said, well, when did you get out of the detention center? And I said, well, just 2 days ago. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. You need to go on to a farm. Thank you very much. Work in the farms, learn English, study language, and pass your English test, and then study for the AMC exam. Anyway, so I did the same thing again in Adelaide and in Melbourne and in Sydney. I realized that I'm getting the same response. So I thought, you know, I heard one day from a wise man that if the ultimate stupidity is to keep doing the same thing again and expecting different results. So a light bulb struck in my head, and I thought, okay, I better find something else. So I found the Centrelink, and so I went there, and I said, well, I'm a doctor, I would like to work. And they said, okay, well, here in this country you have to write a CV. And I said, okay, what's that? And then they helped me to write a CV, and then they helped me to do it the proper way, and I sent application forms to many hospitals in the proper way in Australia, and within 2 weeks I managed to get 2 job interviews and 2 job offers, one from Mildura and one from Shepparton. So basically what I'm trying to say is that you know, if you're in Rome, act like Roman. So I learned the system very quickly, and I was smart from that point of view, where I didn't waste time, and I tried to integrate very quickly. And I was released from the detention center on the 26th of August 2000, and I worked as a doctor. My first paycheck as a doctor was on the 1st of November 2000. So I wasted 2 months on taxpayers' money. And when I got my first paycheck, I went to the Centrelink, tried to return the money back. They think I'm an idiot. So to be honest, once I started working in the medical profession, I just wanted to turn my back to the past, and wanted to forget everything about my history and start a life, start a family in Australia, and move on. And I worked very hard, and I still do, unfortunately. And I found out that if you work hard enough in this country, you gallop through the ladder. So I started climbing the ladder very, very quickly in the profession. And then within 2 years, I managed to get on the most prestigious training schemes in Australia in orthopedic surgery. And you know, the only difference between God and an orthopedic surgeon, God did not think that he was an orthopedic surgeon. Which was his mistake, actually. So, until I received this wake-up call, and it was a shocking call for me, because I thought that I gave a TED talk about the Wheel of Fortune and how our position in the wheel changes, and one day you're on top, and there is a saying we always I always tell my registrars and my fellows, don't feel arrogant, because one day you're a rooster, the next day you're a feather duster. So just remember that, because you know, don't take anything for granted, because when you're on top you need to work hard to stay on top, and because it can only go downhill. And when you're at the bottom, don't feel too bad, because it can't be shittier than that. Tomorrow will be a better day. So that day was the welcome dinner for getting onto the orthopedic training scheme, and to my face, 2 of my colleagues who just got on the training scheme looked at me and they said, isn't it a shame that the Australian standard of training in orthopedics has dropped so low to allow a refugee to be one of us? And that was the stopping point, and I thought, hang on, there is no space for this kind of bullshit. And you know, yeah, I may look different, but I'm a human being like anybody else, and if I work hard enough, I deserve to get here, and I'll show you, bastard, what this refugee will do. And so, so basically, I decided that I turned my back to the past, and well, I turned my face to the past, and I help people to learn more about what people go through, and try to educate people about that refugees, not refugees, you know, regardless of our color, regardless of our race, regardless of our belief or ethnicity or gender. Now it's about gender now happening. We are all sharing the same color blood. If you cut our skin, believe me, we all bleed red blood, and there is no space for discrimination. These days are gone, way gone, and unfortunately, we don't learn from history because all the fights, all the wars that are happening is based on discrimination, and it's based on people come up with some stupid nationalistic ideology or a stupid religious ideology, or and we keep fighting each other, and we are all burning this world together. And I don't know. I mean, all of us in the room will be gone before the earth will change indefinitely. But the world is changing very, very rapidly, unfortunately, and we need to do something about it. And we can start only by looking at each other and helping each other and treating each other like human beings. So, thank you very much.